Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Suzanne Kaiser, and I work as one of the business managers at Alpha Fraternity Management. As Allan mentioned, we are going to allow time at the end for questions, so as they come to mind, just enter those in the chat box, and we will cover that at the end. I'd like to introduce Allan, our presenter tonight. Just to give you a few highlights, Allan has over 35 years of fraternity leadership experience. He is a real estate manager and broker for over 30 years, and he's managed over 200 fraternity and sorority construction projects, including the design and construction of new chapter houses. So Allan, I'll turn it over to you.
Very good. Thank you, Suzanne. We appreciate it. And we thank those people that joined us tonight for this seminar. As we go through this program, you don't have to worry about taking copious notes or anything of that nature. We're going to record the people that participated in our Zoom meeting this evening, and we'll be happy to send you a copy of the slide deck following the meeting. Additionally, this video will be recorded and saved on Alpha Fraternity Management's YouTube page. You can access that by going to our website and clicking on a link that will take you to this video if you'd like to share it with others or review it after this. So with that, we're going to get rolling here. I'm going to share a screen for our presentation, and hopefully our technology will work as planned. Once again, we thank everyone for joining us this evening. Our specific topic tonight is how to recognize a failing chapter. And perhaps even more importantly, it's once you recognize you have some problems in a chapter or with your chapter house facility, to know what to do about it to try to correct that. What are your options and what are some of the best practices? With our overseeing over 115 chapters currently, and having done so professionally since 2006, we see the best practices, we see the danger signs, we see red flags and smoke that precedes fire, those sorts of things in working with chapters. And so you can hopefully gain from some of the experience and the trial and error situations that we've seen over not only our professional career, but as Suzanne mentioned, about 35 years of leadership experience with fraternity organizations, as well as an entrepreneur and business leader. We can identify those sorts of things that will hopefully allow you to avoid some of those mistakes or get them addressed a lot earlier in your process. Suzanne had introduced me, again, very much involved in real estate, in management of apartments and commercial spaces, as well as fraternities. I think what is really important to understand is that a good fraternity is one that is really representative of your fraternity's values. And that would hopefully be the values of the national fraternity and the values of your most successful members. One that has a chapter house and a chapter that commands respectful and responsible behavior, that's safe and compliant with rules, regulations, and safety issues, and is really a source of pride for its members, graduates, and the parents. So we work hard to deliver housing in that area. It's an ongoing battle. We work hard to take groups that are average to below average and bring them up to be best in class organizations on their campus. And we're really happy to be able to help with that. When we do this from a background of a series of sister companies, the main one being Alpha Fraternity Management. But we also have divisions that focus on real estate and finance, accounting and financial management, and then our construction company, Alpha Design Build, that focuses on construction management, design, and so forth. As I mentioned earlier, we work with about 115 different groups across 86 campuses, 37 states. So this is really giving us a breadth of experience to see how different organizations work, what different values are, and best practices that are out there. So as we move forward with this, it's important to start from an understanding that fraternities have a regular series or a regular organizational structure, and that goes through a development and decline cycle. And this is predictable. It's been documented. There's really 4 specific phases of this. And each phase is typically a 2 to 4 year phase. There are things that you can do to extend the good phases and to minimize some of the downward trending phases. But typically, we'll see a good organization go through this development stage and through a stage of decline on a 10 to 14 year cycle. It could be cut short if there's risk management issues, and it can be extended if you can instill a really top quality culture in the organization. But as we look at this program of development and decline, we can kind of see this graph where on the left-hand graph, we see the quality of the organization. The higher the graph is really where we're seeing the highest quality and best functioning organization. And along the bottom axis, we see kind of the years going through it, and each of these phases being a 2 to 4 year phase. As we look at the graph, it's typically starting out in the early foundational years, typically a recolonization or starting a organization on a new campus. And here we see a couple of years where we have entrepreneurial leadership that are people that desire to be founding fathers, desire to build an organization and be part of that. They are typically receive most of the training and learn their culture from the national organization and the manuals and educational programs through the national organization. And they tend to buy into that and perpetuate that culture. We then get into a second phase of organizational growth, which is the higher functioning years. And this is typically where the management and leadership structure will change from kind of an entrepreneurial startup focus to more of a mature leadership focus that desire to continue to build the chapter, to build the organization, are continuing to focus developing a good chapter, still the foundation of the national teaching and education through this. And this is where we will typically see the chapter's recruitment at its best, recruiting based on good, solid values and a well-rounded program. And where we'll see the group performing well in brotherhood and scholarship and leadership areas on campus. The group will often peak somewhere in the 5 to 8 year range. And what happens very frequently here is that the organization starts to develop its own culture. They start buying into a culture that they see on campus of what the young men believe makes a successful fraternity. And frequently that includes a lot of alcohol, risk management issues, parties that become larger and more raucous, greater reliance on alcohol in recruiting, pursuing a social reputation on campus. And here we start to see a decline in the organization. And through that period, the recruitment will start to fall. Through that period, the values of the organization will focus less and less on being a well-rounded organization and more on social areas. And we start to see the recruitment following a path where we're bringing in men that are looking for that raucous kind of party atmosphere, that sort of thing. And after a few years, the leadership degrades, the organization degrades, and we enter a declining period called here labeled Lord of the Flies, a high risk period to where the organization may ultimately kind of crash and burn. And there's some predictable phases for these organizations, and we will distribute this chart here as part of the handouts for the meetings. But if you look at the different focuses perspectives that are along the left-hand side, you can see how the chapter's view or the chapter leadership's view might be in the different phases. And if we look at, at the top, average member mindset, that foundational set of years is really trying to create a ideal fraternity experience. And then we look to the glory years and the group trying to focus on being a model chapter and setting the standard for others on group. We then enter this the first downward phase, which we've titled the slippery slope. And this is where you'll hear the members describing their experiences, work hard, play hard, and perhaps comparing themselves to others, saying we're not as bad as this group or that group on campus. And then in that last declining phase, Lord of the Flies, it's really a situation that's kind of has a metaphor of the Wolf of Wall Street. If you've seen that movie, that's where the organization is just, completely outrageous, and their whole focus is to stay out of trouble. And so this is a very helpful graph that if you're trying to look at your organization, your chapter, you can judge your group based on their reactions, and you can certainly through the responses you might get from the chapter leaders or the perception you may have of your interactions with them, you can identify where they are with this. And these things are very predictable, and if you should enter into some discussions with your chapter leaders, or if you enter into discussions with your new recruits, you'll see some of these things coming through, and we'll be able to identify the specific phase. Another important one is the leadership makeup. This is about 2/3 down this chart. And those early years, we see a strong group of visionary leaders. The glory years, that turns into top upperclassmen holding most of the key leadership positions. As we enter the slippery slope, we see a situation where your top upperclassmen are generally pursuing other leadership positions on campus, and you start to see more and more of sophomore leadership in your key roles. And then Lord of the Flies is where almost all your key leaders are young men that are sophomores or haven't had more than a semester of experience, and they are kind of thrown in the deep end and make a lot of mistakes related to that. Another key one to look at is what's the relationship with the national organization, the house corps, and the chapter advisors. And in the early years, there's a very good relationship where those entities are looked at as mentors and friends. In the glory years, we start to see a little bit more distance here, where House Corporation advisors are seen as helpful, but they really want to focus on their own organizational goals and pursuits. When we enter the slippery slope era, advisors and House corporations tend to be viewed as big brother that's has a negative connotation, overlooking the chapter, and that engagement takes place only when the chapter needs something. And then in that final phase of decline, it's really very much an us versus them attitude, and resentment and distance is created between those organizations. So again, please refer to this chart, ask, open-ended questions to new recruits or your chapter leaders, and this will give you a pretty good idea as to where your group is within this organizational development scenario. And so let's start taking a look at very specific red flags to tell you if you have a chapter that may be in trouble. And you'll notice up in the upper left corner of the screen, you'll see a red flag up there that is indicating something that's pointing to problems. In future slides, you'll see a little first aid symbol, and that's recognizing steps that you can take if you're addressing this. But probably the first and foremost indicator of a chapter that's in trouble is if they can't recruit and initiate enough members to provide full occupancy in the chapter house. As a rule of thumb, if you look at the comfortable occupancy of your chapter house based upon how the members desire to live today, which is primarily in singles, an ideal makeup in most chapter house facilities at this point is probably in the neighborhood of 70 to 80% single occupancy rooms, and 20 to 25%, 20 to 30% double occupancy rooms. We find it with certain exceptions on some campuses where they have sleeping dorms or a cold dorm sort of system, which are fewer and fewer these days. But there's a great preference for the members to be in singles, and you can offer some double occupancy situations, but triples and quads and so forth are difficult and will be challenging to get upperclassmen to live in the house in many cases. But if you take that comfortable occupancy level and you multiply it by 3.5, that is the total membership that you should have in your chapter to reasonably guarantee full occupancy of the chapter house. So with easy math, if your chapter house comfortably held 30 men, times that by 3.5, we're really looking at a chapter of 100 or 105 members. After, if you have 2 recruitment periods per year, you should be up at 105 members after that second semester initiation in order to reasonably fill that chapter house. Under the best of conditions, if you have a great culture, that number may fall to 2.5 to 3 times your chapter house occupancy. But in today's culture on campuses, the fraternity, especially the fraternity residential experience, is really focused on a sophomore experience. And if you follow a lot of our best practices, you can frequently achieve 20 to 30% of your chapter house occupants as upperclassmen, which is something that you should work steadily towards. I'm not sure what happens between the sophomore year and the junior year in the development of a young man, but I can tell you that chapters that house 20 to 30% of their occupants as upperclassmen run better, have less risk management problems, and are just better organizations because there's greater tribal knowledge and maturity in the organization. But based on our organizations now being primarily a sophomore experience, we have to have recruitment each year that is at or potentially exceeds the comfortable occupancy of the chapter house to keep that house full. And if your chapter is struggling with that, if you're seeing declining recruitment, if you're seeing a situation where the we're initiating less than 90% of those that accept bids initially, that is a huge red flag that tells you that there's some cultural issues. And if you talk to your undergraduate leaders about why 15 or 20% of their pledge class dropped out, you're going to get some standard answers of their parents didn't want them to join, or it was too expensive, or something like that. Those are often the reasons that might be given by the members, but they aren't at the crux of the matter, and you really need to dig deeper into that. And the other thing that we've seen is even more so since the pandemic concluded is that the chapters that are just relying on the formal IFC recruitment periods, typically 2 or 3 weeks each semester, are really struggling to make their recruitment objectives. But the groups that are employing a 24/7, 365 recruitment effort, where all of their events are being used to invite prospective members to, where they're actively inviting men to lunch or dinners, interacting with people on campus, having events that non-members are invited to, those sorts of things, we find those groups are doing better and are meeting their recruitment objectives. So again, if you're having a group that's struggling, those are some key indicators that you need to take some action. Other things that are real danger signs related to recruitment. If your members identify with another group or entity over their fraternity, that's a real danger sign. We see on a number of campuses, especially campuses at the private institutions or small liberal arts colleges, where the house may be identified as the football house, but it's really a national fraternity, but all the football players are living in it, or it's the crew house for the rowers or things like that. That's a real danger sign that the fraternity organization is just being used as a shell to focus on other priorities. Also, be careful if you start to see a lot of members that come from the same high school or the same zip codes. What we see with that is that cliques form, and certainly the young men are going to recruit their friends and people that they know. But where you get more and more people from a same area, a same high school, you find that defining the culture of the organization, and the culture of those members start to define the culture of that organization. And you're much better off having a diverse membership that's coming from multiple areas. Diversity actually, we believe strongly, adds strength to an organization. So you really have to be careful if you see too many people coming from the same location, the same high school, or the same sort of socioeconomic background. Another big danger sign is if you see that the chapter wants to affiliate with a pledge group from another fraternity that lost its recognition. This is a very common practice on campuses where we see a chapter that loses its charter because of hazing or high risk management issues and discipline from the national organization or the IFC or university. What you have is a whole pledge class that then wants to go out and because they've bonded together as a pledge class, they wish to en masse join another fraternity. And they will often go to a small fraternity that's struggling with membership, and that looks like a very attractive way to build that fraternity. Unfortunately, what happens with that is you might have a small fraternity taking on a large pledge group, and the culture of that pledge group will then overtake the culture of the fraternity. And many times, if the culture of that pledge group was related to a group that had risk management problems, that dangerous attitude or culture towards risk management will infiltrate and overtake the organization that they join. So if you start to see some of those things happening, I would highly recommend that you communicate with your national organization. The national organizations are very in tune with this, and they will frequently try to avoid those situations or won't accept members there. But again, that's some very significant danger signs. So recommendations of what to do related to this and how to address these sorts of situations. First off, the chapter needs to understand what its recruitment goal is. You'll frequently, if you discuss this with your chapter leaders, they'll say, well, we're only going to give bids to quality men. Okay, well, that's a very frequent thing, and what defines a quality man? How many do we need? And the group has to understand what the goal is and what they have to be striving for in order to maintain that chapter with its growth, with its reputation and good position on campus, and to continue to provide enough people to live in the chapter house to have that chapter house produce the income that's needed to keep it as a competitive housing asset. So you have to start out by really educating the chapter leaders on where they need to be with their membership goals and how to attain those. You should be communicating with them what full occupancy of the chapter house looks like, and what they need to be looking at as a responsibility to fill the chapter house. That's one of the things that the alumni house corporation or advisor group can't do. They can't fill that chapter house. That's the responsibility of the chapter members and the chapter itself. And so there has to be a collaboration, there has to be an agreement, there has to be a common goal of filling that chapter house, and what happens if they can't produce enough men to fill all the beds in the chapter house. I touched on the goal for full occupancy, and I also mentioned earlier that the pledge class side should be equal to the full occupancy number of the chapter house, and building consensus with the undergraduate leaders to follow those areas. Other recommendations include a discussion with the recruitment chairman and the chapter leaders. What defines a quality man? Do they know what values that they're looking for? Again, if you leave it up to the chapter to develop this themselves, you're going to hear things like, I want a guy who's really chill. Okay, what does that mean, really chill? Okay, ideally you want to continue to ask them open-ended questions to have them analyze, go through the thought process a little bit deeper. So what does it mean to have a quality man? What does it mean from a standpoint of scholarship? What does it mean from a standpoint of the values of the organization? Are we looking for someone that's going to develop into a leader on campus? Are we looking for someone that's going to be socially active? Are we looking for people that have interest in philanthropy? And so again, identifying some of those key values will help them better assess the men that come through the door that look to be to join. Other parts of this discussion can be just discussing what their membership recruitment events look like. And if you're hearing that their membership recruitments are all about big open parties, that is another danger sign. The chapter should have a well-rounded recruitment plan, and ideally, you should have a chapter advisor identified that is specifically mentoring the recruiting chairman, the rush chairman, on the proper planning and execution of a recruitment program. We find that our members, especially our recruitment chairman, often aren't given a lot of training, and our members today, especially the sophomore members, have not developed many of the project management and planning skills that people that may have gone through the fraternity experience in the 60s, 70s, 80s period. We just have different skill sets. And we find that the young men today aren't as good in planning, forecasting out far enough, and giving enough time to execute plans prior to events, and going through the understanding of the process before it happens so that it can be well executed. So a recruitment advisor that can guide them through that and try to keep them on task will provide a very large benefit. Moving on to other red flags, we have new member education. Again, if we're seeing a lot of pledges dropping out of the program, if there is not a structured new member program, for instance, if the chapter is not following the national organization's member education program, that is a big red flag. What we find is if they're not following a structured program, they're making up their own program based upon what they think is the membership experience should be. And that often results in a situation where young men are trying to one up or do better than was done to them through their recruitment period. And that's a cycle that frequently leads to hazing or risk management issues in the new member program. If the organization has their own ceremonies that are unique to the chapter and haven't been approved by either the national organization or the chapter advisors, that is, again, a big danger sign that the group is identifying as their own organization rather than identifying with the values and the ceremonies and the programs of the national fraternity. And if there's alcohol at any new member events, that is a big red flag and is frequently kind of a kiss of death if that gets brought up from a violation standpoint with a national fraternity or a local IFC. If we have new members or especially members within the first week or two of school or during an orientation period that are provided alcohol at an event, that is a big no-no risk management issue that's going to get the chapter in deep trouble. And I say that fully knowing that 75 to 80% of our organizations are providing alcohol to minors at their pledge events or their recruitment new member events through that prospective new member or what we would call rush phase. So again, be on the lookout for that. Ask questions of your chapter leaders, ask questions of the new recruits to tell you about their experience, tell them about what they found as their most fun recruitment event, what recruitment events would they change or try to improve. Asking those sorts of open-ended questions will get you the information that will really help you identify what's going on there. Other red flags on this, if you talk to the pledges and you're told that there's anything that's requiring them to exercise formally, that's a very big sign of that there's a hazing problem going on. If they're required to run errands or clean, if you see around the chapter house clothes, mattresses, sleeping bags in unusual areas. Frequently, we have historically referred to it as Hell Week, but we find pledges being required to sleep in closets or coal bins or boiler rooms or things like that. If they're being required to stay at the house and sleep in areas that aren't comfortable, that are ideally they should be having the experience of sleeping in a regular residential room that their big brother or other members are sleeping in, not being punished by being put in a dungeon or something like that. If you see any messes in the chapter house where there's signs of condiment, syrup, ketchup, mustard, food that is a big mess on the floor in a basement or a meeting room or a dining hall area or something like that, that's indicative of lineups where the pledges are put in a line and then there's some sort of humiliation or degradation and that the members feel, the initiated members that feel are indicative of fun or something like that. But that's a big danger sign. And any situation where there's work or tasks required of only the pledges. If the pledges are required to clean up the chapter house once or twice a week, if they're required to go out and shop for groceries or deliver cookies to initiated members, those sorts of things, those are big signs that there's hazing involved in your programs. Any sort of activities that are required of the pledges that you don't have the active members, side by side working on those same sorts of things are stretching into the definition of hazing. And you really need to be mindful of what's going on there. So some recommendations of how to address these sorts of issues. Again, a lot of this is communication, and a lot of this is having senior leaders, whether it be undergraduate or alumni leaders, talking about the culture, what's expected, what the experience is like at your chapter, and what things are not going to be tolerated from an experience. So again, discussion with people. Something that can be very beneficial are some follow-up phone calls to the pledges that dropped out of your program. That will, a short 5-minute conversation with those men will really identify the cultural issues that are driving men away from the fraternity. We would recommend a situation where there be a documented member education program and the chapter advisors review it and approve it each semester, and that there is some discussion between the advisors and the chapter leaders, the recruitment chairman, as to this is our program, this is what we're going to stick to, we're not going to vary from this. And then another best practice is having some level of alumni interaction and involvement involved in the days immediately preceding initiation. That's where we see a lot of these Hell Week activities, lineups, forced sleep deprivation, forced alcohol consumption, those sorts of things frequently take place in the days immediately prior to initiation. And so if you can have alumni, 1 or 2 alumni members attending a lot of those events, being at the chapter house to squelch some of those issues or to nip things in the bud, that will be something that can keep you out of trouble quite significantly. We also highly recommend a process where the alumni and senior level chapter leaders are perpetuating a positive culture in the chapter house. And to do that, this culture has to be taught. And it honestly needs to be taught every year and really twice a year, where each pledge class is informed of this culture, informed of what the expectations are of membership, of how they're going to act, how they're going to behave as members, that sort of thing. And this is a talk that only takes about 20 minutes to go through with each pledge class. And you talk about this is what it means to be a member of Delta Tau Delta on this campus. This is who we are. This is what we believe in. This is what we want to be identified, or this is what we want our reputation to be on campus. And we expect you as incoming members to uphold and succeed in doing that. And then the other part of the conversation is this is what we aren't. We aren't drunken slobs. We aren't going to be known as people that take advantage of our guests, our female guests. We aren't going to be known as druggies or people that are, treating people without dignity, respect, and fairness, where we are discriminating against people. That's not what we are. Conversely, we're known as the gentleman on campus. And I don't care what fraternity you're involved with. That exact same talk can fit almost every campus and every organization to talk about what is the values of your organization. And there's a lot of materials from your national organization that can be used to convey that properly. And then what we aren't. And that we aren't going, as an organization, we're not going to tolerate people that go outside of these norms of behavior and expectations. And if you start that program, you will be amazed, because after 2 to 3 semesters of sharing this message, you will start hearing the members reciting those values back to you almost verbatim in your conversations. And it will guide and shape the chapter culture. And if you don't teach this culture, the chapter is going to develop its own culture. Every chapter has a culture, whether it's planned or unplanned, intentional or unintentional. And if you're not specifically educating and holding people accountable to that culture, the culture that's going to develop is what the men perceive are important to 19-year-old men, which is having big parties and chasing girls and, outrageous behavior. And so if you're starting to see that culture within the group, it really means you need to re-educate the group with a targeted culture program. Some other danger signs looking at chapter programming. If your GPA is below if the cumulative GPA of the chapter is below the all men's average on campus, that's a huge danger sign that you're not attracting quality men. On average across the nation, on almost all campuses, the all fraternities men's average is about 1/10 of a point higher than the all men's average on campus. Fraternities consistently do better in academics cumulatively as groups compared to the all men's average on campus. So if your chapter GPA cumulatively is less than the all men's average, that group is certainly underperforming, and it means that the men may be distracted by other activities that's taking away from their studies, or that they're attracting men that aren't as serious about pursuing their academic studies. And, we have to be really serious and upfront about that. The whole purpose of the fraternity and the college experience is to get these men to graduate so that they can be successful and have better lives and take the skills they've learned in college and the fraternity and take them into their workplaces and communities to improve them there. So if we are not focusing on getting our men to graduate and be successful academically, that is a serious problem that is a problem at the alumni level and the advisory level, as well as the chapter level. If you perceive there's too great a focus on social events, if the group is reluctant to attend the national organization conferences and summer conventions, they're not paying their national dues on time, that us versus them mentality, or if you're seeing increasing damages after social events, or you're being told that the out-of-house brothers are damaging the chapter house, again, big red flags that there's some cultural issues going on there and that your group is headed in the wrong direction. So if you're seeing some of those indicators, some recommendations that we would suggest you follow. Again, teaching the chapter culture is huge. We find that the more chapter members you can get to your national conventions, the higher performing your chapter will be. They'll go to these conventions, they'll learn not only about culture and value, but they'll learn the procedures and policies and operational techniques from other successful chapters. And as demonstrated through the speakers at the national organization, they will learn from that and they will bring that back and plant those seeds within the chapter. So if the alumni group can fund the travel expenses or registration fees at these conventions, those sorts of things to get more members there, you will see that come back with improved chapter performance. Another thing that we would recommend is the chapter advisor should review the check ledger or the online bank account transactions from the group. And if you're seeing most of their expenses being paid out towards social activities, that's again a big red flag. Ideally, you want to see expenses that are being done for philanthropy and brotherhood and academic programs, all these sorts of things. But where the chapter spends its money is where its focus is on from a cultural and an organizational standpoint. So a real quick check can be just going through their bank transactions to see that. And you have to be a little careful with this, because if you go through and you see entry after entry being written to Ray's Liquor Mart or something like that, that's a sign of a risk management violation where chapters are not supposed to be purchasing alcohol with joint funds. So again, if you see that, you know you've got a risk management problem, and that may need to be addressed. Two events that we find greatly improve the performance of the chapter are a fall strategic planning retreat that takes place in the days immediately prior to the start of classes. Ideally, that strategic planning retreat is facilitated by an outsider, either a alumni member that's skilled in facilitating these events, or someone from university student programming, the national fraternity, a paid outside facilitator that can take them through strategic planning, getting the organization focused on key goals and what it wants to accomplish. In addition to that, there should be some level of recruitment training each semester. Again, a simple 1 hour or 90-minute session that teaches the basics of recruitment, meeting people, conversation. You can take a lot of it out of, how to, the Dale Carnegie book, How to Meet Friends and Influence People. Those principles still hold up and are strong. And there's, again, the national organization will have materials on all of this, but the men need to be taught how to recruit, how to meet people, how to engage in conversations. And since the pandemic, these are skills that many of the young men are challenged with. They haven't developed these skills as much as maybe previous generations have. So talk, practice sessions, education, those are all very important things. And just the whole axiom of having alumni advisors that are there to monitor, that are to teach, and that are to advise. And I want to point out here that when we talk about advisors, we're really talking about a separation of duties from alumni that serve on the house corporation versus chapter advisors. Ideally, you don't want chapter advisors serving, or alumni serving in both capacities, because that can raise a liability issue that can put the House Corporation assets at greater risk than if we have a complete separation of duties between the House Corporation functions of being a landlord versus a chapter advisory committee or chapter advisors that are really there to mentor and to educate and guide and advise. So we don't want to commingle those sorts of activities, but having advisors that are taking the actions of these recommendations will go a huge influence in a positive way, where you'll see the results of your chapter turn around and improve quite significantly. Chapter house occupancy are another set of red flags. If we have less than 90% occupancy of our agreed upon comfortable occupancy, big red flag. If members are not signing leases promptly, if the officers are not living in the chapter house, and if less than 20% of the chapter house occupants are upperclassmen, those are all danger signs that are generally going to result in open beds in the chapter house, which means reduced revenue, which means frequently that you can't have the income that's necessary to maintain that chapter house as a competitive and safe asset for the men to have a good experience in. So the chapter house occupancy is something that requires ongoing focus in these other areas. So some best practices here to address that. You should have a structured lease signing process where leases are distributed fairly early each semester, so that new pledges are signing those lease agreements early on. We start signing leases with many of our groups in October and November. If you're waiting till March, April to start signing leases, you will see your occupancy fall off in doing that. So a structured lease signing process where men are expected to sign by specific dates. Again, leases signed early in each semester. We would suggest that you consider developing a membership agreement that talks about a lot of the expectations of membership, including a live-in requirement for the chapter house, that this agreement needs to be signed as a requirement for initiation. And we suggest that this include information that if they choose not to live in the chapter house, that they may be subjected to additional out-of-house fees or additional parlor fees if there's empty beds in the chapter house. And we have examples of this and can help guide you through this if you would like. And then we also suggest that there be a written agreement that is developed, reviewed, and signed at least each fall, if not each fall and winter, or whenever your chapter officers change office and you have new chapter officers, a written agreement that really outlines the responsibilities of the House Corporation and the responsibilities of the chapter towards that residential living experience. And by having an agreement that's put in writing, you have something that's easily communicated and can be handed down and handed off to people. You have a document that can be referred back to, and by actually physically signing the document, you've got a written record that this has been discussed, it's been agreed to, and the group can't plead ignorance to those situations. So these documents are not, huge multi-page agreements. Usually a 2 to 3 page program that outlines the mutual responsibilities with bullet points is sufficient. Enough that they can be discussed, referred to, and communicated, referred back to. That will go a long way. And within this written agreements can be a lot of the the key factors we talked about. What is the comfortable occupancy target? What is the recruitment targets? What are the live-in requirements for new members? What happens if we have empty beds in the chapter house? What are the alumni responsibilities to provide for a chapter house facility that is well kept, well maintained, meeting the conditions of building codes and rental codes and those sorts of things. Those can be memorialized and referred to fairly easily. Another set of significant red flags here are the condition of the chapter house. If you're seeing chapter house in a bad condition, that is frequently analogous to a situation where you have a bad chapter. Where you have a bad chapter house, you typically have a poor chapter. So a lot of danger signs here. If we're seeing members complaining about the condition of the house, members reluctant to live in because of the condition of the chapter house. If you're having to decrease your rental rates because of the condition of the chapter house, that's a huge problem. And if you don't believe that your chapter house is, in the top third of the quality of chapter houses on your campus, again, I would suggest that that's a big red flag there. So suggestions here, again, we have a list here, but making sure you're doing improvements on an annual basis to keep the chapter house in a top condition. We don't believe it's a good model to take out a big mortgage or do a big fundraiser and then drop $1 million into the chapter house to make it nice, and then see the chapter house get beat up over a series of 10 years where it needs to be another mortgage or big fundraiser to bring it back up to snuff again. It's much better to see improvements done every year so the members can see that the chapter house is continuing to be reinvested in and improved with amenities that are important to them. That will allow you to increase your rental rates. Even if it's not in a top condition, you can maintain market rental rates to continue to improve that chapter house. Doing capital improvement planning and budgeting, preventative maintenance schedules, doing a good chapter move-in and move-out process. And another big thing that we recommend is engaging professional cleaning to clean the bathrooms and common areas at least once a week. With the groups that we oversee, over 90% of the groups engage professional cleaning. And this is one thing that the parents, especially the mothers, will be happy to pay for, to know that there's professional cleaning to keep a level of sanitation at the chapter house. Lastly, we see some danger signs, not necessarily from the alumni level, from the member level, but from the alumni level. If your alumni house corporation has low cash reserves, your reserves should be equal to at least 1 year of your operating expenses to continue to operate, insure, and maintain the chapter house in case you would to lose your tenant to risk management or something like that. So if you have reserves less than 1 year of your operating expenses, that is something you need to work on. Too little leadership at the house corporation. If you have a situation where everything's being run by only 1 or 2 members, that's a situation that is a problem that can be open to those people becoming sick or retiring or passing away and then not having a handoff period or a transition period. We've seen cases of embezzlement. If there's too few people involved, a lot of bad things can happen. If you're not having regular meetings or the meetings aren't organized, not formal agendas, formal minutes, conducting them professionally. If you're not filing your tax returns on time, poor financial reporting, and if the house corporation does not have any procedures in place for accountability for cleaning and damages, those are all huge problems that result at worst in a complete failure and loss of the organization and the chapter house asset. So those things should be addressed. So here are our recommendations. For lack of time, we can go through these, but these are all best practices that your house corporation should be going through, that we can help guide you through if you would like, or provide examples of. But that interaction with the chapter, regular inspections, uh, ongoing fundraising programs, engaging professionals for operational management, financial management. Those are all key things that you should be considering so that you can run your organization as a highly functioning business that's going to be successful. So with that, thank you for listening. Thank you for following along with this. Happy to open the floor to specific questions. We'll take the first few questions specifically on this topic, and then I'll be happy to open the floor to questions on anything related to fraternity management.
Okay,
Suzanne, if you can.
sure. You must have done a great job because we don't have any questions at this point.
Okay, well, let's open the floor to questions on any topics that people may have, and happy to provide guidance or critique on anything that you may have related to our programs, best practices, or challenges you may be facing in your groups. Okay, we haven't had any questions pop in yet. So with that, I want to thank you for participating in this seminar. I hope you'll find it helpful. If you registered, you'll receive a copy of this program and some of the handouts. I will stay on this meeting for at least the next 10 minutes. If anybody would like to hang out and ask additional questions or discuss topics, I'll be available for that. And otherwise, if you have gotten the information that you needed and wish to sign off, we thank you. The session is formally concluded. Still stick around for the question and answers, but we thank you very much for your participation.
Allan, we do have one question now from Nick.
Okay.
I have a chapter that has run out of money and has been unsuccessful recruiting. Do you have any recommendations for keeping them engaged if they lose their chapter house?
Well, that's certainly a tough situation, and I would first try to dig in to what are the roots of the problems. And I would ask a follow-up question from Nick. Is it the alumni that have run out of money, or is it the chapter and the chapter members that have run out of money? And what is putting their chapter house at risk? If the chapter house is at risk because of low recruitment, low membership, those are problems that I provided some recommendations on how to address those sorts of things. If the chapter house is being lost because the alumni group is underfunded, we do have some best practices and potential solutions for that. And I would suggest that you reach out to us, and I'd be happy to go more in depth on a one-on-one situation to determine the issues there. But at some point, the house corporation has to take the steps necessary to preserve the housing asset. And that may mean that the group needs to temporarily reside someplace else. And let's say that the chapter house sleeps 30 people, but the men can only fill 10 beds. it may be best for that organization to temporarily rent a smaller house to still continue their residential experience. And that can be done by the members going together and renting a house to continue and perpetuate that. And then the alumni can step in and rent the facility out to other students or other organizations that will restore the cash flow that's necessary to provide the proper revenues to maintain and continue the house. And very specifically, we run a program that we call Save Our Chapter House, where we have alumni groups that come to us with these sorts of problems. And at any given time, we have between 6 and 10 house corporations that we're working with that have lost their revenue stream because of risk management or low recruitment or these sorts of problems. And we've helped dozens of organizations bridge the gap to restore a situation where they've got the revenue stream to temporarily continue the operations of the chapter house and to work on a program to give the chapter the opportunity to reorganize, rebuild, to where they can go back into the chapter house. And what we find anecdotally, which is somewhat interesting, is that the house corporations, because of low occupancy of the chapter house, are struggling to pay the bills, and they're seeing the condition of the chapter house degrade, where when we go out and find other people to occupy that chapter house at market rents, you'll see an influx of revenue far greater than what the chapter was providing, that then provides the infusion of cash that's necessary to start taking care of the deferred maintenance and bringing that chapter house back up to a condition where it can command market rates. Usually this is a situation that is related to poor recruitment, and working with the advisors to rebuild recruitment is a key issue. Sometimes it is related to a chapter that has a bad reputation on campus. And honestly, there are times when a membership review and paring that group down to only a few dedicated members that can then start to rebuild it, or a full recolonization effort, may be necessary to do that. And during that effort, which is a multi-year effort, the alumni group has got to preserve that housing asset. And I would highly suggest that the very last course of action that you would ever consider is to sell that chapter house. If that is anything that's being discussed, please reach out to us, because we believe that we can save that situation before selling the chapter house or letting it go into foreclosure or anything like that. So, Nick, if you're dealing with that situation, or anybody else might be facing that, please reach out to me for a one-on-one consultation, no charge. And we would very much like to see a situation where that chapter house asset can be preserved, because once you lose it, getting a chapter house asset back in the future is really a challenge. They don't come up very often, and often the asset you have now you would not be able to replace with a new asset in the future with as good a location or things of that. Your alumni group identifies frequently with the chapter house that they were involved with. If you lose that asset, you undermine a lot of alumni support. So there's bridge financing. There's a number of other techniques we can help with to save that asset. Hopefully that gave you something to chew on there, Nick.
And that is all we have right now, Alan.
Okay. Well, as I said, I'll hang out for another few minutes in case someone has a question that they would prefer not to ask directly or in front of a larger audience. But again, I thank you. Please, feel free to sign off. Hopefully you found this beneficial. If there's any situations related to your chapter operations, the management of your chapter house, the improvement of your chapter house, please reach out to us. We believe we have a very good model that's being duplicated throughout the country, that's providing a model that is sustainable and delivers consistent, good, successful results and a better chapter house experience for the members. So thank you very much.